Former New York Times journalist Bari Weiss, who left her paper calling out the ideological bent, which had infected every aspect of the publication, well, she went on to start her own media operation, and it has just been snapped up by CBS.
A major shift in the landscape of TV news. Paramount Skydance announcing that they've made Bari Weiss editor-in-chief of CBS News and acquired her online news and commentary organization, The Free Press. Weiss, who attended Columbia University, is a Pittsburgh native who now lives in New York. The Wall Street Journal writing she's known for her outspoken support of Israel and strong takes on polarizing topics, including gun rights, diversity, and inclusion programs, American higher education, and President Trump. She's a registered independent who at one point called herself politically homeless, unrepresented by the two main U.S. parties.
And the left-wing media has reacted in such predictable fashion. Bari Weiss is a weird and worrisome choice as a top editor for CBS News, The Guardian reports. Well, joining me to discuss this and much more is Adam B. Coleman, founder of Wrong Speak Publishing and the author of a new book, The Children We Left Behind. Adam, thank you so much for joining me on the show. This is so interesting what CBS has done, and I'm really keen to get your thoughts. But from my perspective, it seems like many of these mainstream media outlets in America have recognised that independence is a massive issue. And you've essentially got a journalist that has, in a couple of short years, managed to build this online following, build her own brand to a degree that it's worth quite a lot for these mainstream companies that I think they're losing these audiences.
Yeah, they're losing these audiences because it's very clear that there are a lot of Americans who don't feel like they fit in either camp. They're somewhere in the middle, just like myself, rather independent, independent-minded, and want to think for ourselves and don't want to necessarily go along with every party line, position. And so I think Bari Weiss represents someone who at least attempts to be fair. And I think that attempt actually comes through and why so many people have signed up with the Free Press.
Yeah, it's going to be challenging for her, I think, to navigate the broadcast media differences from her traditional print background. But it's obviously interesting that they're doing it, I think, from an ideological point of view. And it's obviously a recognition that they've been getting it wrong, that they've swung way too far to the left. And it's a play to get these audiences back.
Yeah, it's obviously a play to get more of the centrist audience that's there. Whether she'll stay in that position for a long period of time and there won't be some sort of mutiny from the leftists within Paramount is a different story. But I can at least appreciate that Paramount sees a value coming from independent media and even more so coming from independent-minded readers and viewers. And maybe this is a change for the right direction to try to at least get some form of fair-minded media coverage.
Yeah, we'll be following it closely. But now to the Middle East.
But we start here. President Trump now providing new details on that peace deal between Israel and Hamas. In a cabinet meeting today, he said he expects the remaining hostages in Gaza to be released Monday or Tuesday. Also saying he plans to visit the Middle East, but is still working on the timing. Trump hopes the deal will provide lasting peace in the region.
We reached a momentous breakthrough in the Middle East, something that people said was never going to be done. We ended the war in Gaza and really, on a much bigger basis, created peace. And I think it's going to be a lasting peace, hopefully an everlasting peace.
Now, this is such welcome news to all sides of politics that even the likes of CNN had reporters just openly praising Trump and labelling the peace deal momentous.
You know, you talked, Aaron, about how we got here to this moment today. Can you tell us a bit about how this deal differs from, previous deals that we've seen eventually break down?
Yeah, a couple things. One, the prior deal announced in January was sort of a joint effort between then the outgoing Biden administration and President Trump's administration. What we're seeing now is a couple months into his term, President Trump kind of reestablishing, including that trip to the Middle East, his relationships with those leaders. That has played a role in just getting the sides to the negotiation table and getting this deal done.
Adam, what a fascinating change of pace for the media's coverage of Donald Trump. I know you've been following how the media talks about him very closely and all the work that you do. I was actually quite pleasantly surprised that they are giving him the credit that I do think he deserves. And here in Australia, even our left-wing political leaders are praising Donald Trump. I never thought I would see it, for getting this peace deal up and actually potentially putting an end to this war after all this time. Were you pleased to see how the media has been framing this?
Yes, but I hate to sound pessimistic since I'm usually an optimistic person. But I give it about 24 hours for them to find some sort of way to minimize his impact, his role in the peace deals. Maybe it was already happening. He just put his name on it and he's taking credit, or they'll come up with something. But at the end of the day, there is peace happening in a region that has been war-torn for the past couple of years. And there is something to be said about President Trump, at least in my lifetime, as a 41-year-old man. I've never seen a president aim for peace so often. He ran on essentially no more stupid wars like we were promised years ago with previous presidents. And instead of getting us into more conflicts, he's actually trying to not only minimize the amount of conflicts that we get into, but to bring peace for conflicts that we're involved in and conflicts that other people are involved in. He truly wants to be the peace president. And whether it's for bragging rights or whether he just truly wants peace around the world, that's up to the person who hates him or likes him to determine that. But what I care about is that he's actually achieving it.
Yeah, the outcome's probably what's most important. Well said. Now, moving on to The View, where Joy Behar has made headlines after alleging that Donald Trump sending troops to cities to help with their crime issues is actually an attempt for him to steal the next election.
There is crime in American cities, but the way to deal with it is get the funding that you need for police, get the training that you need, and work with local officials.
This is a pretext to stop the next election. That's what I think it is.
I would say,
Adam, they can't help themselves, can they, with this kind of inflammatory rhetoric?
No, they can't. The View, especially Joy Behar and Whoopi Goldberg, they're essentially what I would call blue anon. They come up with different conspiracy theory thoughts. But if you were to ask her follow-up questions like, how exactly would he stop the election, she would not have an answer. It would just be a bunch of gibberish. But the good thing is that they don't have a ton of viewership. No one really takes them seriously as far as political thought leaders. The Price is Right gets more viewership than The View. So, are these people crazy? Yes. I've watched The View over the decades they've been around. There used to be some sort of interesting political dialogue and perspective that could be gained whether you agreed with it or disagree with it. Now we're just watching upper-class women who gallivant around New York and complain about a society that they don't touch as they sip on mimosas and go to their penthouse apartments. Like, that's the type of vibe that we're getting from these people. They don't speak for the American public.
Blue and on, I absolutely love that. Adam B. Coleman, thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate your insights.